thank you for coming in. And today's topic would be on building trust and aligning to changing security goals. It's a very interesting topic and a very, changing times in terms of cybersecurity. Okay. So without much ado, I will not bother to introduce each of the panelists, which I have to do. So let me just quickly do a round. I'll start with Mr. Reddy, who's the CISO of UBI. Reddy sir, put your hand up so the audience knows who you are. Then we have Pawan Chawla, who's the CISO of Future. So we have somebody from the insurance. Then we have Sanjay Tiwari, who's from IIFL. He's very early because he wants to capture his new NCD issue coming up soon.
Yes.
So then there's, of course, Vijay from good old Mahindra services. I used to a lot of good vibes about Mahindra.
Yeah, I'm from Airtel Payment Bank.
Okay, fine. So my transcription of the old man is messed up. Your name was there in the panel. So welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have banking, payment banks, we have small banks, we have insurance. So I think we have a good audience, a good panelists today. So thank you all for joining in. Asim needs no introduction. He's the big boss of Akamai, product manager and the guru on everything to do with what keeps us awake. And then, of course, Chinmay also works there. The rest I will leave out, though they are not visible to you. Okay. So I'll start with the first question for the panelists. And this is a very simple question, but whoever wants to take it first can do that. Okay. But time and again, we have seen that financial services remain to be the top choice as an attack target for cyber criminals. Are you seeing any shifts in attack during COVID-19?
The shifts, what I see personally is that there is a huge risk on the domain names because they have launched one fake website and they have redirected through a fake link and they captured all AMP, OTP, CBB. Earlier, people were, like medicines and all, they were doing a lot of phishing simulation, and now vaccination registration and all these things are happening. So this one, the phishing and smishing attacks on rise by using the domain names, and there is no control, and we are seeing that the domain names are being created at different countries altogether, not only in India, in some corner of the country. It is being created at Japan, at North Korea, at South Korea, USA, and all. And at the same time, there is one more, attack which is surfacing that during this COVID situation, a lot of job losses were there. So people are trying to use the logo of the organization, and they are saying that they are recruiting people for their organization in social media and in different websites like OLX and all. It is again a uncontrollable situation. Now it comes to the social media. It is again the top senior officials. They are being targeted with the fake account where there is no regulation. Recently, fortunately, we have got some regulation on social media thanks to Government of India. They have come out very clearly, that fake accounts which are being created, and now I think within short time all accounts will be validated with some OTP or something. So that way, I think the surface will be mitigated. Not 100%, but the way it has gone, it has shifted. The kind of the transformation which has happened during this COVID, probably the shift is again it will go on, but certainly some regulation mechanism should come in. So more or less, what I meant to say, the shift in attacks are primarily in three. One is your phishing attacks, which are commonly it has grown like anything. And second is the domain names, and third is the DDoS attacks. We are also seeing the DDoS. Primarily, these are the three types of attacks which we have seen in the last December to till today. So the necessary mitigation measures are required for every organization to take it forward. So this is from myself.
Thank you very much. Pawan, over to you, please.
Yeah. Like Mr. Reddy touched upon, there are a number of domains which are registered by the attackers. So we have seen a big shift ever since the COVID started in 2019 December. I was reading multiple reports, and there were some interesting facts which I would like to highlight here. that every day since January 1st, there were around 500 domains which were registered by the hackers. Obviously, they are not the company's website, not domains. And now we realize that one examples of the kind of attacks which hackers have given have used to target their the multiple banks or other organization employees and customers to attract them and make them share the critical information. It is very evident and it is very clear the modus operandi has changed. The modus there are different ways of forms which have been adopted by the hackers, and now they are using and they have used human emotions to do a targeted attack to the customers. We personally, as an organization, I can share the numbers with you. Last year, we have blocked more than 20,000 indicators of compromise. More than 20,000 indicators of compromise in a year is a big number to be prepared for. And we have seen that some of them were there in the environment, and but we were successfully able to take proactive actions on that with the help of advisories which we have received, and able to protect against those attacks. And similarly, other organizations might have used the same indicators, or might have got the advisories where the proactive action has been taken. But the emphasis needs to be given to the number of indicators which we have received, and these are the numbers which are available in the open market, which are on which the advisories are created. What if there are attacks for which the advisories are not available? Because most of the people, what they feel is organizations we have seen, even if they are under the attack, they hesitate to share the information. And that is where you know that something has happened, but you don't know what to do to protect yourself from that. Now, if somebody is ill, he can go to the doctor and take a medicine. If you don't tell that what is your problem, nobody can give you the medicine. The others can also not be protected from that particular disease, right? Similarly, in cybersecurity is like that only. Until and unless you know from what you need to be protected, you will not be able to protect yourself.
Yes, good thoughts. So I'll hand this last bit over to Asim to give an industry perspective, what his thoughts are, because if any other panelists want to say something before Asim, you're most welcome. Akhil, you wanted to say something, and then after that, I'll give it to Asim.
Just quickly in 30 seconds or 1 minute. So actually, whatever your question was there means related to financial things. So my always perspective, always attacks always it is there in across industry, but the financial thing is like where money lies. So always, and but during this scenario, you can say it's an emotion based attack. So whatever people have utilized this, Mr. Reddy and Pawan also they have mentioned. It's like people are creating some phishing, wishing, and all those things. It is getting created, and today this news related to our biggest public sector bank that is also related to that. Now you consider it's now we have reached to the phase where this medicine and all those things it has come. Those pharma companies, those are also in the targets. So that is also some news are there. It is not open, but still. So again, some of the other thought processes going on whether government of India can declare those companies at least ad hoc basis that is critical infrastructure to protect all those things. Because ultimately this you can say it's a cyber attack, and although it's a very easy to take anything instead of going and doing the robbery. And definitely it's as per a study also around 3 to 350% increase is there during this pandemic time in the cyber attack. And this is across all the industries.
Thank you, Akhil. Asim, you want to say something?
Sure, thanks, Subbu. So I think my fellow panelists summed it up really well in terms of what we were seeing, threats growing, right? I think attackers always shift towards where the industry is shifting or where the users are shifting to. So we've seen in pandemic for the first time, probably in the across the history, so many people working from home, right? This is probably the first such instance in our life at that level where billions of people are stuck at their place and trying to work from there. Obviously, it's not as secure environment as the corporate environment. Attackers know it. While we are working for home for the first time, attackers have been working from homes and basements for all that for their entire life. So they know the shift has to be attacking towards the users who are stuck at home, right, within vulnerable devices and networks. Also, there's a significant shift on a digital side now, right? Because a lot of businesses that used to be in a brick and mortar sort of a setup, with pandemic, everything had to become digital. The users could not really go visit any place. So there's a upward trends about digital access, whether it's bank, insurance, any business, OTT, media, video, right? The number of users online has grown significantly, and that's for attackers. It's like striking a gold. They know that more online users are there, and there's a lot of chance of attacking, right? We've seen a lot of growth in attacks like phishing because of the pandemic situation. Now fake domains that either talk about, let's say, masks or vaccine or COVID, they are being registered. For financial services, since most of the users are online, even if you generate a domain that talks about your bank is coming up with a new offer, or your bank ATM is down or might have an impact, as an example, you're bound to see a lot of user interaction because of the whole digital ecosystem has changed right now, right? And then we saw attacks like video credentials of Zoom getting leaked out, where now the account takeover suddenly became a lot more popular because a lot of people who used to log into the Zoom earlier, the attackers had their credentials already, right? So I mean, for financial services, as I just heard, one of my fellow panelists say that financial services is an industry that's always under threats because of the financial motivations that the attackers have. So from that perspective, I don't think that will change in near term. That's something that has been there and will be there given the very nature of the business. But going by the amount of data and the volume of digital transactions today, it becomes even more important for financial services industry to be more resilient, more scalable, more secure than ever before.
Okay, Asim, I'm going to overload you now because you seem to be in a very spirited mood today. So the next question is for you. Okay. All of us have experience working with major financial services institutions across APIs. I think API is the glue which allows us to do a lot of things which normally would not have done, especially in the COVID time. And what, according to you, are some of the emerging threats against financial services, and are organizations ready to defend against those, right? API is like welding, you put both the connectors, but what about the security for that? And I think that's something I think I want you to throw some light.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's both a very interesting and an important question. Yes, APIs, I really can't think of any conversation that I have today. At least in a day, I don't talk about APIs, especially financial services. Some customers of ours in Australia, across APJ, very heavy adopters and implementers of APIs. New business models, new partnerships, new ways of rolling out apps to the users. New services for the users. All is made possible using APIs. Moving away from legacy systems, specifically on banking section, right? Going more towards cloud agility requires movement towards APIs or integration of APIs. Now, while most of the focus today is always towards, how do you get this to work, or how do you kind of fix this problem of legacy architecture, move to more agile architecture using microservices and APIs, a lot less attention is paid towards the security of APIs. That's something that I see banks have woken up to. Most of the customers that I speak with, financial services industry today, API security seems to be one of their top priorities. More so with the emergence of fintech and fintech-like businesses, that the banks are venturing out to on the partnerships they have. So yes, the challenge though is that while attacks on APIs today are significantly higher than the traditional websites and HTML forms, organizations today treat APIs as just other form of their websites and applications. I think that's the trend that needs to change. APIs needs to be looked under a very different lens of security, having a more robust defense in depth, specifically which is tailored for APIs, right? Today, if you look at, many organizations are still talking about rate limiting on APIs, or maybe providing basic authentication on APIs, still using legacy form of authentication and encryption. Those are good things to have, but a lot more has evolved in API security space, and many organizations are still playing catch up because API security still seems to be in their checklist, but not yet prioritized. I mean, many breaches, if you see, in the last 3-4 years, if you pick up the book of breaches, many of these breaches have happened through APIs, and many of these APIs were not even under radar of the organizations, because APIs are fairly quick. You launch them, at some point of time they became dormant, then the developers release another version of APIs, the other version of API is still exposed on the internet. It's a different ball game and different problem to consider, and hence, I think what I'm seeing as a practitioner is more and more organizations starting to understand that this is the right time for putting a lot more stress and mitigation practices or best practices for API security.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, I think little more focus on APIs, because I think that is the Fevicol which binds most of the applications together. Sorry for taking a very popular brand name, but the gluing is good, but the security, I don't know. So one more question on this is, let's talk specifically about APIs in initiatives such as open banking, where the need to integrate with third-party ecosystem is pushing banks to adopt more agile practices, especially with respect to API adoption. But we all know that API security for most organizations is still not being treated on priority, something which Asim had highlighted. While attackers continue to take advantage of this, how are you as end users dealing with API threats? I found Vijay very excited about the API story, and I think he has a lot of API interconnects. Vijay, would you like to open the innings for this question? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Subramanian. API security is something which need to be taken into consideration right at the development stage of any given application. First of all, the architecture need to be very clearly adopted, understood first of all before even you start developing that particular application. Point number one. Point number two is understand and clearly state which are the APIs which are going to be utilized for that particular application, and it cannot be on an ad hoc basis. People generally what they do is they go search for something, and suddenly a fintech is there, they start adapting without even understanding whether that particular thing is really good or not. Okay, just because something is there, very fancy name, probably they start adopting. First of all, that thing has to go. People need to ensure that there is proper testing that is being done for each of it before adopting. There is definitely a time allocated for each of it, and then of course integrating with the application which is planned to be introduced in the organization. That is one part. The second part is all these APIs, as very clearly stated by Azim, undergo a lot of change. And as he rightly said, many of them are just siphoned and they start using the the newer ones, and older ones still remain as part of that particular application. So lot of cleansing need to be done about this particular thing. A review of the application more specifically from the API perspective has to be done on a continual basis. Very, very important. You can have application security testing and all that stuff. That's a one-time thing, and probably at specific intervals you will perform. More than that, what is important is you pass it through some kind of an application security systems, technologies. A lot of technologies are there to adopt. You pass them through that particular thing, understand every moment, and then anything is happening. And also wherever possible apply MLA components which will clearly indicate there is something wrong happening, or some kind of a fishy session is being created with that particular application. So that will help us point out which are the probable APIs which is acting very different from that of the normal, and ensure that that is being quarantined and necessary action is being taken. So that's the mechanism that need to be followed, and it has to be a continual process in the organization.
Thank you, Vijay. Very good perspective. I'm glad you went to the back end with secure architecture first for API before we start anything, and then put in the tools. Sanjay, you guys also do a lot of API integration, right, at IIFL? What are your nightmares?
Yeah. So I was patiently hearing everyone, but rightly said, number of views there. API, as I said, all digital adoption has happened through an API everywhere. Asim also mentioned that, and Akamai has that product of an API security. I know them. But my two viewpoints. One is there is an you put some product for an API security. Since all digital acceleration has happened through an API, so whatever has happened through an API, and all banks, financial organizations have taken that. But the main problem that I have seen, in fact, I have seen many of the attacks happening, is through the exploitation of the functional bugs of APIs. It's very easy, as you said rightly, it is a connector between the front end and the back end. And there are a number of attacks that keep on happening. Account takeover was one of them, but there are a number of simple and logical bugs which is still there. So if I go on a particular big website, big bank's website, and I try to hunt them, I'll be easily able to find 2, 3, 4 easily bugs on those API. So an IDOR or account takeover, there are many of them which could be easily done, as you rightly said. From my perspective, from my organization, we do take the due care of these APIs as, but see, it's always there. The business has a requirement, as Asim said. It's very easy to put into production. Tomorrow there is a requirement in within a day's time. I build and I have to move in a production. I'm not able to test that also. What do I do? Do I tell business you cannot go? So बोले, तेरा जरूरत नहीं है, right? So I have to balance those things. I say, give me a day's time. I go ahead, I test it out, but probably no team would be able to test it thoroughly within a day's time, and that's very important part of it. Hence, there is a control that is required on the testing part of it, thoroughly testing it, putting into production, and then you can have a mechanism, kind of an Akamai or some tool where you keep on continuously monitoring. Your older versions don't come. You have an inventory in place, and blah blah blah, a lot of steps are there. So I may not go into that detail, but there are measures and steps. As Asim said, it's high time organizations start taking this API into API protection very seriously, because most of the in fact 90% of the attacks are happening through an API. Last week, one of the wallet fintech got breached, and that was through an API. So there are a lot of data available in the social media around, but that was through an API. There was an API SQL injection and API extraction of data. So I agree with them, and that is where, in fact, as an organization, we started our journey long back. I don't say no one would say they are fully covered, but we take due care around it. An organization should ensure they give a lot of attention towards this.
Good point. I just want to add a perspective to this. I call the Indian financial security as a three-legged stool. You know the challenges of on a three-legged stool? If you ever tried standing in one, the probability of you crashing is very high. Who are the three legs? One is the great RBI, whom Mr. Reddy mentioned about. Then there is a great IRDA for the insurance sector. And then there's a good old SEBI, right? Now they stand on three different legs with three different attitudes, three different perspectives. Okay. I don't want to comment who's ahead of the curve on this. I really don't want to comment. I think they're doing a good job, but it's up to each user to do a better job. So you can't say RBI only gave me a framework last week. Because RBI and all banks are running on Gopalakrishna committee report. Even today they run. Gopalakrishna is still alive, fortunately, if you want to. But the fact remains is Gopalakrishna report about 20 years old. Okay? And I'm a great critic of that report because it was relevant 20 years back when you wanted to jumpstart. And today, 2021, I think we need. Same thing IRDA cyclically have been trying to do. At least RBI has started a dedicated security under our good friend Sarvade. Okay, I don't think SEBI has got anything to do in that. Okay, and actually, if I could have given a press release, NSE failure was because of security threat from China, that also would have flown in economic tax.
Absolutely.
And so everybody would have been very happy with that explanation. So I think we need to get serious about this. I'm just adding a perspective, panelists, because I think I have a lot of gray hair. Okay, so I will move on to the next.
Sorry, Mr. Just before that, I just wanted to, kind of chime in on the last part, because I think it's a very important discussion that we brought up using frameworks and the practical approach side. And I mean, frameworks have been there, as we rightly heard. Whether you follow the UASC methodology or you look at the Gartner framework for protecting the APIs, like discover, protect, and analyze sort of thing. At the same time, you always know or prepare yourself for a disaster. That's why you need solutions in first place, right? Because there is no silver bullet for security, right? So you know that you're going to be rolling out something, and there is a potential for a risk for that something, and that's why you need defenses in place. Else, as a matter of fact, but I think to me, always security is about the balancing act. Business should carry on, security should carry on. There is no stepping back by either of them, and that's why we need approaches that balance out. Either it's using the architecture, and there is a continuous practical assessment and implementation that keeps going on. So yeah, just wanted to kind of bring my perspective on that one. Thanks.
Excellent, Asim. I agree with you. We always be top of the next threat, right? We can't expect the regulator to be on top. Nowhere in the world, forget India, has a regulator been ahead of the business. Never. There's no instance where the regulator has ever found something before it happened. Okay, so let's not, be. I mean, the idea was not to criticize our regulators. They're doing a wonderful job. Okay, so and I think your point of frameworks are very important. Okay, and somewhere that sort of when you go to any of these great seminars which we have, if you search for framework discussions, there'll be very few. Maybe Gartner would have one session on frameworks, that's it, or somebody else. But really, framework is left to all the PhDs to do their bit in the labs. And reality, there has to be an interface for the framework with the reality of the business. Now, I used to be with a very dynamic businessman who now chairs a bank. He used to be an NBFC when he used to work for him. Overnight, we will do a product. Okay. The product will be deployed on Excel. Okay, no security, nothing, Excel. If the product succeeds, we will build a software on it. If the product fails, the Excel is buried. Okay, very dynamic guy, and he has grown a big business today. I won't mention it. Okay, but I think that is a lovely strategy because from a risk perspective from the business. But he always was for making a product and putting a database finally. He said, let us try 3 months. If there's a traction on the product, we used to be in higher purchase those days. Let's do it. Otherwise, it's fine. We kill the product. So, I mean, so the business is also important in that perspective. Okay, so I'll jump on. Instead of giving a lecture to my esteemed panelists, let me move on. Okay, there's one more on API coming up, and this is specifically on banking and bankers. So I want both sides because the insurance company deals with bankers, NBFC deals with bankers, everybody deals with bankers. So there's only one banker today, senior banker with us, Mr. Reddy. So I want everybody's perspective on this, both as a user as well as the service provider. As the user reliance grows more on internet banking due to COVID-19 pandemic, there is a high probability that your website and ABIs are not ready to handle that amount of traffic, impacting user experience and dealing with degraded performance. Did you anticipate this? How did you handle this situation? So the minute your website starts degrading, it is open for attack. Right? It's a fundamental. So who wants to start this? Mr. Reddy, I will not push you on this. Okay? Up to you if you want to start since you're a banker. But all of us have this. Now, Mr. IIFL's public issue is going to have this. So Akhil's payment bank will have this. So
yeah.
Over to the panelists. Yeah.
So I'll take this. So ultimately, this traffic and other thing being as a digital bank, because my earlier background, it is from public sector bank. There are also now currently in a digital bank, where each and everything we are expecting it through the digital platform only instead of my brick and mortar type of branch. Definitely, and it is not a new means this load and other thing. Definitely, it is not related only during this pandemic or something. So all these things like how my application architecture design or something, how it should take care of this load, how it should traverse to the load balancer side, and all these things it need to be taken care. So definitely this part basically it start from the design side, not like a development. Like earlier you were giving example, design that product in Excel sheet and after that it can be done. So definitely for the software side, I think it is not going to happen in that way when considering this load balancing thing. Once design is correct, after that development accordingly, how we can shift that load and all those things, I think if that need to be taken care of.
Let's come back to the question now. Yes, good question, good right thought process. So with the advent of hybrid and private cloud infrastructure, many banks have built private cloud infrastructure and also many are in hybrid. Okay, hybrid and private cloud. How do you ensure the web performance and security services work across your distributed data centers and hosting environments with the required performance, controls, and security? Signing up the cloud is the easiest. I think the last three are very important. Performance, controls, and security. I want to add one more to it, which is not security, which is the cost. How do you manage the cost also? So I leave it open. Any cloud adoption here among the panelists, you get a first chance for whatever, whether it is storage or whatever you adopted the cloud. Share yours. Sanjay, you're in the cloud. Huh? Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we we have adopted. In fact, we have started adopting cloud due to this COVID in a very big way. One due to a lot of advantages on the agility part of it, accessibility. What we have done from the security perspective is we have strengthened on the zero trust architecture kind of the fluid parameter. So what has happened is the perimeter of my security from the security perspective is now fluid. So it is moving to cloud, it is on premises. I have an hybrid structure around that. So what we have done, we have put controls, necessary controls, generally on the identity and access management controls. So people have started accessing systems from home. Now, how do I control those systems? What access do they have? Do we have a multi-factor authentication kind of a thing, or what limited the role-based access control we have? So is strict enforcement on those sides from the security front. The cost and the agility perspective, obviously there's a lot of advantage around it. Everyone would agree to it. As and when I want to scale up, I can scale up, I can scale down. That saves me a cost, a pay per use kind of thing. I don't have to invest into infrastructure around it. As and when required, whatever components I use, or either web or application or licenses kind of thing, so it's available and I pay later on based on the agreements to the cloud service provider. So all these advantages have been there, which we have observed over a period of time. Security is one of the headache. I said we have started adopting zero trust, but it's there. Since you have an hybrid structure, some people would be directly accessing some workloads on the cloud, some would be on the on premises kind of thing, some would be going from on premises to my hybrid environment. How do I control them? What access do they want? But we have started adopting a lot of you could say zero trust framework. We have started controlling on the identity and access control. So these are the controls around which we have tried to implement.
Thank you, Sanjay. Other panelists, surely you will have something on the drawing board, so free feel to give your opinion. You can't avoid the cloud today.
Okay,
So
let me take
add
it
a
up.
perspective. That's it.
I
Vijay,
think
you
Vijay
want
wants to go first, Pawan, if
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
okay
sure.
with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, when it comes to cloud adoption, first of all, the strategy has to be clear. Whether the organization wants to have an hybrid mode of adoption or a private cloud, pure private cloud kind of a component. Okay. And then again, the cost component. You have to be very clear what the CFO is allocating. Basis what CFO is allocating, determine which is the particular model which will really suit us. Right? One is there are two aspects. One is short term and also in long term, because we should also be very clear. If in case it is long term, then accordingly we need to work out the methodology with that of the service provider, or else we will falter there. Because at any given point of time, if the regulator comes up and say, hey, come on, close down all the shop out there, get back. So you need to be also clear what is the kind of MOU you have with those guys, to see for it that whatever adoptions you do in the cloud, you'll be able to bring it back to your thing. Supposedly you start using specific frameworks of the cloud, you cannot bring it to on-prem directly. You have to be very clear whether you will adopt a private cloud model wherein you will be able to sync and get back all those things into the organization. That is point number one. Point number two is with respect to that of how your solutions are being securitized when it is in the cloud component. Even if you start adopting any one of the service provider, be it your Google, the Azure, whatever, every name you have in the billboard. Now, when you happen to talk about the security is not going to be compromised just because it's in the cloud, and it is not the onus of that particular provider. You are still responsible, and you have to sign off whenever there is any kind of a breach or anything with that of the regulators. So you have to be clear about that particular aspect of it and provide the needful security. Only difference probably is you can extend the security what you have on-prem to that of the cloud component by having cloud sensors equivalent of it there, and get the necessary intelligence or put in the necessary controls out there. That is point number one. Or probably use cloud native security components, adopt them, and then try to have a clear visual of that particular thing through monitoring and also through controls. These are the two possible mechanisms which you can adopt, and see for it that everything is well monitored, and time to time you review that particular thing. Because if you assume that it's all done and you leave it, it's not going to really work out, because there is a lot of changes happening in the cloud. So you need to be well informed about that and do the necessary measure to ensure that they are sufficiently safe and secure. At least for the knowns, you are really secure. But yeah, unknowns will always be there, which is beyond control.
Thank you, Vijay. Pawan, over to you.
Yeah, I'll take a minute because my co-panelists have already touched based on the pieces which I wanted to talk about, and thanks for helping me out and already covering those points.
No, Pawan, you have to act at least, I mean, as a teacher, at least 3 points you have to give us.
Okay.
Start stretching your mind.
During this this pandemic has taught us one thing. One, the agility, and second is the availability, which with the traditional way of implementing infrastructure was always a challenge. Adoption of cloud, if you look at it, might which was not even there in the agenda of any organization, has been the agenda of the organization now. The adoption of SaaS-based product has increased, and people have realized that they can actually give you the equal level of security as you get what you can achieve from a traditional way of implementing a solution as well. Like Vijay has correctly mentioned, the cloud adaptation has to have a strategic view, and we need to have define a very clear roadmap of what it need to be uh, adopted, how it need to be adopted, and the way you want to implement that out. Like Sanjay has touched based upon, security is the foremost secure priority for any organization, and it has to be in line with the security requirement of the organization. Now, I touch base on the ROI of that as well. If so, I differ, Vijay, from that perspective from you, because if you can prove that the cloud adaptation is going to give a better result with the better availability and the eligibility, I think no CFO in the world will say no to the adaptation, even if it is in plus X amount of money. CFO will definitely give you, because he knows that what revenue can be generated from by adding this X amount to the portfolio. That would be my say, Subramanian sir.
Thank you very much, Pawan. So, any other panelists want to add? Otherwise, I'm going to hand down the baton to Asim to give a different perspective. So, anybody else wants to say something? Because cloud is, please. Okay, yeah.
Just one line I will add it. What Vijay and other panelists was mentioning, like security. So I'll talk about that thing. Just one line. In security side, it should be definitely after strategy formulation, adoption, and all those things. Security, it should be aligned whatever, if at all, if it is our internal, if it is a hosted. So it should be in the same line. Second thing, which we say always a punchline, like in our sense, means anything we can transfer that responsibility to the cloud side provider, not the accountability. So ultimately, if anything is happening, that ultimately we are accountable, not only just responsible. So all these controls, whatever we are expecting as per aligning with our security controls, it should be implemented there. Continuous review and all this configuration and other things need to be taken care by us only.
Thank you, Akhil. So Asim, can you give your perspective?
Sure. So I think from cloud perspective, the most important thing, which I think my fellow panelists covered, is obviously it is a strategic decision, and you need to have a very clear idea about why do you want to go to cloud. And most of us today know why, right? The amount of agility that businesses require, the amount of scalability that businesses require, automation, costs, all of that in a long term plays out better with cloud. However, one thing that people or organizations need to understand is that not all clouds are built equal, right? There are different flavors of cloud out there: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. It's upon your requirement and your assessment that can really yield best results. From my perspective, I think for financial services, two key things that come to my mind is what you mentioned about, right? Especially when you have hybrid setup or you have your data centers, you have half cloud, that sort of a setup, is the cost and the continuity of security, which is, both can be achieved using cloud because it gives you a unified platform, right? Today, if you look at maintaining security, I'm sure you interacting with several devices, IPS, IDS, bunch of things at your perimeter, multiple data centers, your licenses are bought in that perspective, right? And then you also have cloud. In cloud, you have different licensing scheme and things like that, right? One is consolidation. How can you make the security controls in a very consolidated and cost-effective way? Uh, in a short term, it may look like big amount, but in a longer run, it actually makes a lot more sense from ROI perspective if you're looking at unified platforms like cloud to provide you security. The other thing is obviously, the continuous security posture or a consistent security posture, because now using the same unified platform, you are able to provide security across multiple data centers, applications in a single central place, instead of worrying about how a firewall A will interact with a firewall B, which are in disjointed data centers that don't talk to each other, or maybe there is a firewall patch issue on site A, site B seems to be okay. So that kind of sort of things that becomes an issue on operational level, I think that really becomes quite easy with cloud adoption.
Okay, let's not make this a cloud class. We have another 5 minutes left. One of the panelists has indicated they have to leave at 5, which is very nice, and we will stick to the time. I was wondering who will get me back into my old mode of just finishing on time. So Asim, the last question is going to be for you, so that the panelists again has a wonderful insight. And this one is very important because this is the new era beyond cloud and stuff. So the question is, while banks pay a lot of attention, banks, security, financial services, I would say, pay a lot of attention to secure data on their premise. A new breed of attacks known as magicart or web skimming attacks are compromising third-party code, which could be the bank's trusted partner, and exfiltrating data from user browsers, including things like credit card details and user credentials, which means just picking up from users' thing. How much attention do you think banks are paying to protect the user data by focusing on browser security? So Asim, I leave this to you for the next 4 minutes. This is what you call as the closing. Then I have to close the thing because I think Sanjay has indicated he has to leave. Sanjay, you need to give me 5 more minutes of your time. Okay.
So thanks for that. I think this is, I'm sure most of us know about the changing landscape and threat. We talk about that a lot, day in and day out, being security practitioner. One of the things that has fallen off radar and chart, and rather many organizations don't have control on, is what's happening on the user browsers. And off late, this has become a trend, more so during COVID and pandemic, that a lot of attacks are now targeting user browsers to exfiltrate the data, which is actually your data as an organization. So you may be a bank, you may be an insurance company. It's your user which is going to their browser, trying to sign in or fill up a form, and their credentials get either stolen or the credit card details get taken from the browsers, right? So that is kind of a threat that has been more popular across last 3-4 years. Mesh card attacks have become very popular, but not much advancement has happened in terms of adoption by banks. I work with some of the banks in Australia, New Zealand, other part of Asia Pacific, which have now begin to understand this as a serious threat, because they see a lot of user privacy data laws coming into impact, right? Like CCPA, GDPR as an example. Many countries are coming up with their own privacy law, and the user data that gets breached is your organization's responsibility. Now, one thing that's really crucial in this piece is the trust factor that banks play, right? Everybody knows banks for the trust. I mean, that's the foundation on which the bank's business is built. And there is the user trust obviously placed in the bank as well. And there is a third-party partner trust that you have with your trusted partners, vendors. It could be CDN providers, it could be your marketing analytics tools, it could be performance monitoring tools, anything else, right? Now, there are attacks like Mesh Card that leverage a third-party breach or third-party trusted vendors that get compromised, and that's so malicious source codes fetch the user data from their browsers. A classical example of this is a security researcher that showed how they were able to use Google Analytics to exfiltrate the data from the user browsers. Now, I can't think of any organization that uses Google Analytics who would even think about something like that is possible using Google Analytics, right? This is just one example of how these sort of attacks can carry out. But I think while we pay a lot of attention towards APIs and web security and our perimeter security, there is a newer breed of attacks that we see, web skimming and Mishcard increasing, and there's a lot more focus that it needs in the industry right now, so that we can start focusing more on the browser level security for the users that will be interacting for your websites. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Asim. And just let me wrap this out with 2 minutes extra with Sanjay's permission. Thank you all for your time. I think the goalpost is shifting. PLA is dead and gone. We need newer PLAs to come in and score goals. And I think the whole landscape is changing. The last point was very valid. And I think there's more to come. I think, every day I go to Twitter and in social media, I think the goalposts are changing. And I think one of our challenges is being on top of the curve. And that's going to kill all of us, okay, whether we use Gartner or anybody else. But at the end of it, I think as a CISOs or as security practitioners, all of us need to be on top and be ready to score the goal again and again. Because the day we miss, our organization goes down. Thank you all for your time. Excellent discussion. I appreciate all your presence in today's panel. And thank you, Banking Frontiers and Asim and Chinmay for giving us this opportunity to host this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good day.
Thank you.